I'm very drawn to the book and the idea of the book. So during my my trip in Germany, I went to Moto Books, and I would I went almost like every other day that I was there, and during my first time there, I had said to the girl that was at the desk, I said, "Where are books from contemporary Black artists?" And she really didn't have an answer for me,
Yeah.
and it's kind of annoying, It's like, all right, I mean, I seen, like Black artists in the mix, but not as the focus. And for
Mm.
me, that was very annoying. So, the idea of where I wanted to take publishing from a contemporary standpoint the idea kind of like started, in Germany. But it came into fruition when I actually did this document called BlackMass Project BlackMass, which was a document that I compiled with work that was contributed from three friends of mine. They all worked in different mediums.
Mhm.
Some of them were film artists, some of them were painters, some of them were sculptors, some of them didn't have a particular medium at all. They just made what they
Mhm.
wanted and did what they want. But I wanted to try to uh, compile this and conclude it and present it all in printed form. I wanted to kind of like to see how our work sit next to each other. How does it react next to each other? What does it say? And what conversation will our work be together in this medium in print? No,
I guess
please.
it's interesting how you see it as a platform for a dialogue.
Well, yeah,
Um,
it was more so to be of our work and conversation, because like, yeah, we speak on a personal level. Yeah, we speak about private things, but we've never had our work, kind of like be in the same conversation with each other. So it was kind of like, like an introduction into how our work would operate next to each other. And, the book was the idea of how I wanted to present it. And uh, we went forth, we did this book, and I didn't want to stop there at just my three friends. I wanted to also invite um, other artists to join in on this publication. So it went from three contributing artists, including myself, which made four, to now added in others, which actually ultimately compiled into 13 contributing artists, 13 contributing Black artists. Um, fr- Friends of mine and other artists whose work I respect and admire as well. And it kind of came, I carried this book around with me for maybe around 2 months or so, revising, taking pages, adding pages, you know, um, compiling work, adding work, source material, archive material, and we finally conclude this book. We finally conclude the book. The book comes together, and um, we were going to put it into production, and the book it never went into production. Where it was supposed to go into production, we didn't want I didn't want to create an excessive amount of books. I wanted to stop at 50, and the distributor that wanted the book wanted a little bit more copies than I was obliged to print. So it never this particular book never went into production.
materialized, right?
Yeah, it never went into production.
It became a base for things to come.
It became a base for things to come, for sure. The book winded up getting acquired by the Schomburg uh, Research Library in Black Culture here in New York. So for me, that was even more about better accomplishment, because now it kind of sits where I initially did a lot of the research for this book. Now the book sits in the same research library
Mm-hmm.
as the archives, of a James Baldwin, as the archives of a Larry P. Neal, you know, all the people, all the poets, you know, Black poets who I look up to. Now it's like, you know, my book is there with them as well. So to me, that was even a bigger accomplishment. But I would say that we are trying to represent the idea of what the book means for us. And that's why, you know, we have this relationship, not just with the book, but not just with traditional printed matter in the book form of, you know, you print a book, you bind it, you know, and this is the book. You know, what we're doing is we're trying to represent the idea of the book and the content that sits in the book in a way that is in conversation to what we're trying to say. I mean, the book has always been a resource of to get a message out, you know, and to be able to use it and to utilize it in whatever way that you so choose to use it in. And for me, what's so important is I don't work well with restrictions. So, you know, for me to be self-publishing and for me to be able to work, not just, you know, a part of my practice is to work collectively. So in everything that I do, I'm going to always add someone in. I'm going to always add, you know, there's going to always be a collaboratory based. That's the focus and the work that I'm doing. So, you know, for us, it's like we're in conversation with ourselves. You know, like everybody else is just kind of like, you know, like they're kind of like looking from the outside. You know, because we're kind of like it's like an exchange of information between us. You know, we're in conversation with each other and we're representing new ideas through the idea of the book. And I think that's.
Are you saying that there is a degree of exclusivity
within the way we're presenting?
Within the way you work, yeah.
I don't want to say that because I think that we all. I mean, it constantly changes, you know, in everything that we do. Because I mean, the idea of how we present to work is, you know, is going to be presented through this idea of what people perceive as like the book, but it doesn't just stop at the book because we're also now trying to transmit other things within the scope of printed matter that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with printed matter. Like let's say music, you know, we're trying to translate the feel of music through printed matter. And how are we doing it? We are kind of like repositioning this idea of, you know, like what the book is supposed to be, or like sheet music, you know, like sheet music is supposed to be something that you read to kind of like transmit the music into this feeling. And this is why, you know, people like Butch Morris is a huge inspiration to how I work as an artist, you know, because, you know, he kind of like had this experimental sound on how he worked with music, you know, and, you know, one noticeably project that he did was called Conductions, and where he did an orchestra and where the music read different in each performance. And I'm kind of like trying to translate that through printed matter to where, you know, rhythm is what I'm pretty much going off of to inform the idea of how I want to present the book. So you're never going to get like this consistency in everything that I'm going to do because I'm not trying to be pinned down as an artist. So that's why when people say, oh, you know, yeah, publishing was the introduction, but it doesn't stop there.
Yeah, it's like means, it's not the subject.
Music informs a lot of what we do. You know, music informs a lot of how we approach the work. Music informs how we operate. I know it informs how I operate as an artist. It's been kind of like, you know, the base. It's kind of like, you know, free jazz had this, okay, traditional jazz was kind of like this idea where it was like, you know, traditional jazz could only be played by a particular instrument. It had a particular sound, you know, it had a particular style, a particular remnant. And then we had free jazz. You know, free jazz kind of like ushered in this new idea of what jazz can be perceived as. And you kind of can't like pin down free jazz. So like BlackMass Publishing is like, you know, the free jazz of publishing. We're not trying to like create this idea of like, this is what publishing is, this is how it's supposed to operate. And I think the best example for that would be Miles Davis transition. I think he's probably one of the best jazz musicians to use this example for, because, you know, when Miles Davis, you know, first started to make music, it was this classical jazz. It was very particular. It was a very particular sound. It was beautiful. It was simplistic. It was soothing. And then Miles was also known to like dismantle his band and start from scratch, because he didn't want people to pin him down. He didn't want people to, you know, keep this particular idea of what he is as a jazz musician. And then the best album that I can think of at the top of my head is Standing on the Corner. And if you listen to that album, a lot of the critics during that time in the 70s said that Miles drifted further away from this idea of how he thought jazz should be perceived. And I said, no, what Miles Davis did was Miles Davis just dismantled the idea that y'all had in y'all mind as to what jazz is supposed to be. You know, he had this funky sound and it didn't sound like jazz. And that's us. You know, we're not trying to be pinned down as to like this one particular way of how we operate with printed matter. We're not trying to like bind the book and say, all right, this is, you know, we're printing the book in this particular way. It's like, you know, you're not going to pin us down as artists. We're going to engage with the book in whatever manner we so choose to, you know, operate with it in. And then we're going to also represent it in our idea, in our reality. And we're going to continue to do this through this form, but we're not going to stop at just the book. We're going to also
with the form, yeah,
we're going to add in things in addition to that, and music is that base for us, because it's you know, you really can't really pin it down, you know.
Yeah, so I mean, the amazing thing about free jazz is that it's also a it's like a communication, right? There is a degree of responding to one another. There is a degree of really kind of conversing the same way me and you are talking right now. That there is a real kind of dialogue, and I think that now really ties in with what you said earlier about having a dialogue within the book format.
Yeah.
It's almost that kind of the idea of album is not very jazz, because it should never be the same, and by having it as an album, it, you know, you can almost like replay it. I mean, so is music subject of your work? Do you talk about music, or is it inspiration or structure more conceptually?
Music is the subject point, whether it's an obvious or it's not obvious. It's going to tie in to everything that I'm doing. I'm working on this new project where sound, space as in matter, like space as in not like the outer space, but space as in how we utilize the space, sound and printed matter. I'm merging all three subjects. Because now I'm trying to allow also printed matter and space to be used in a way of how I inform and how I work with printed matter. So like, you know, I'm trying to investigate this idea, including music as well, on how am I going to allow these three subject matters to interact with each other.
Come together, yeah.
And it always comes back to music for me, because
so is there an editing process that is similar to playing jazz in a jazz band? How do you edit?
I don't, you know, for me, I mean, Okay, TT is the best example for what you just said. TT started out with 233 pages, right? And that book was informed off of the conduction process of Butch Morris's conduction album, and it was made literally to the sound of. So the pages were uh, inserted based off of how he orchestrated the set. So each page does not so the beginning of the book starts off the same, but your book and maybe your friend's book for sure won't be the same, and how it interacts with each other. Um, Not only because of how the pages were instant based on how the music informed it, but also because I'm constantly adding pages to the book. So now the book has like maybe 300 pages. The edition is almost done, but you know, there's no editing process to that. It just keeps being revised. So, it's keep being added to. Nothing being subtracted. There's
Yeah,
more elements
yeah.
that it's keep being added.
Basically, what you're saying, it's always a finished product, but it's never the finished product.
Never. No,
Yeah,
I mean,
but it can
I'm
always be the end, but it's never the end
no
product.
because it's gonna spill into something else. It's almost like uh, uh, so a lot of the titles, of the books that I do is again informed by music. So like I did this one book last year. It's called Ogunde, and this song, this sound, this piece that John Coltrane did is called Ogunde, and it was a very chaotic sound. It's almost hard to pin down a sound like this. He's using tea kettles, he's using pots, he's using the trumpet, he's using everything. And it's kind of like this beautiful chaos. And this is what I wanted to try to translate in the book that I did, Ogunde. So it's kind of like all over the place, but it's been informed by this free jazz piece. So it's kind of like it's like a beautiful chaos is the best
That's
way.
amazing.
It's a beautiful chaos is like it's kind of like the only way that I could explain it.
Yeah. So, at what point do you give one book away?
So
And then, when you say how it constantly evolves and transforms, and actually it's this process of adding, at what point do you kind of let it go?
oh I let it go from the moment that I allowed the world to interact with it. I mean, I don't own, like, I have a problem with ownership. It's very easy for me to relinquish things. um I think to hoarder the work is to do it a great dishonor. So I'm not necessarily trying to, the moment it leaves my studio, the moment it leaves my hand, I've let it go.
But how do you decide when is the time? That's my...
Um, I don't know if I've ever.
It's instinct. Yeah.
I've never really thought of that idea. I guess because I've never uh, put into my mind that it's mine from the beginning.
Yeah.
You know, I've always just created based off of the instance of creating and then just letting it go. So I would say that the finishing product is every book that's made from that point on. I guess I've let it go from that point on. It's yeah. I wouldn't know how to. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's a great answer though, because I think it's very instinctive. It's an instinct, because you obviously speak about it never having an end, but I guess even when you give it away, it starts to live a new life.
Well, yeah. Someone said this about TT a couple of weeks ago. There was someone who had the book, and they said to a friend that every time that I review the book, I see something different.
Yeah.
And
I mean, there's something beautiful about your approach to it, because book then becomes not a catalog of something, but it becomes, and it's not just a manifestation of a narrative, you know, it's not a manifestation of a story, but it's a real kind of cinematic device.
oh yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, there's also huge elements into a cinematic approach. You know, even from how, you know, the book was even orchestrated from the beginning. You know, like so a very good brother of mine, Kwame Sorrell, who's a huge part of BlackMass Publishing. He uh, designed the cover, and he was living in France at the time when he designed the cover. So uh, he named the book TT, which was named after an African fly, like a healing fly.
Oh yes, of course.
And
Yeah.
he made the cover based off of an Apedia visually that he got from the flea market at the flea market in France. So he purchased the book, you know, for very cheap, you know, made kind of like collages, and he would be sending me, we were on two different time frames, so he would, when he sent me something, I would get it late, so this communication based with the book as well. So it started out with communication, and so like he was in France, I was in New York. He did the cover, and he said, "This is the cover." I said, "Yeah, this is the cover." And then from there, it kind of like again like informed this idea, Butch Morris and free jazz, and again this cinematic approach as well. And it kind of like informed everything from that point on. And it's like the it's still in process. It's still in progression. Right. It has not ended yet. So yeah.
So if we just maybe go back to creating something that is almost a platform for Black artists. You said how when you went to Berlin and you asked in a bookshop, you asked where is the section on Black artists. You
well, not necessarily. Well, see, there was a, and this will tie into your question, to what you're asking. I forgot the woman. I'm sorry. I'm just, sometimes there's a lot. So James Baldwin is a lot of, he wrote on a wide, large, he penned on everything. He wrote about everything, And she says James Baldwin will be so upset to know that his books, when people come to look for them, that they're only in the Black Studies section, because it pins him down, right? We know he's Black. I know he's Black. We know what he's saying. But to have him only subjected to Black Studies then pins him down as a writer, as this idea, like.
Well, thanks, Yusuf, because this is exactly what I was getting at with my question.
So it pins him down. So I was not necessarily looking for a section that was necessarily dedicated to Black.
Okay, thanks.
Because
that is problematic in a way, right?
Because I know I'm Black, and I know what I do, and I know what I'm saying, but I don't necessarily need to be pinned down. Like, when people are coming to look for my work, I don't want them to be like Yusuf is in, BlackMass Publishing is in, Black Studies section, like I want to be, and I'm very, against restriction.
But can I challenge you, Yusuf? why is then BlackMass Publishing a platform for Black artists?
Because I think that, and I've been asked this question, because I think that for myself, and I'm pretty sure that I could possibly speak for the rest of the people that I've worked with, I think that for me, I feel white people have said enough. And I'm really not that interested in what they have to say right now or in general. And I think that is a necessary, is necessary, and it's very therapeutic for us to be in conversation with each other. You know, we're not, I don't think that this is I don't look at it as segregation. I look at it as therapy. And I think that it allows for us to conclude and to work with each other and to understand each other and to offer new ideas. And, you know, I think that it was a necessary approach for me to take, especially in a contemporary art world where, you know,
contemporary America.
It's like, oh yeah, in a contemporary America, I mean, contemporary in the world, you know, it's like, you know, I've had, you know, not that I need to hear this, but I've had, you know, tons of white people say to me, I'm so happy that this is happening. I'm so happy that you're doing this and it's necessary. And it's like, I know it's necessary. That's why I'm doing it. But, you know, it's kind of like, you know, they're letting me know that it's necessary. And I'm like, I knew it was necessary from the beginning. So, you know, and this is not for me to say that, you know.
I mean, the reason why I love it is because it's beautiful. Just to clear that one out.
Okay.
I mean, I just think it's beautiful object. I feel I'm slightly upset that I'm excluded.
I mean, you can still interact with it, you know.
No, absolutely. I mean, I do interact with it.
But look at this. But look at this. Like, this is happening. So maybe you are a part of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
We're in conversation. We're talking. You know, we're exchanging
Yeah.
information. You know,
I think so. Yeah.
Talking. So you are included.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think that is so true. I mean, it's a difficult one. I mean, because it's a balance between, I totally get that you want to create space for a community that you associate with, and that is completely, you know, there's no question whether that is right or wrong. And then at the same time, I think you say that you want to be in dialogue, and that and again, as you say, like we are in dialogue, because if we weren't in dialogue, then actually that so this justifies the dialogue aspect of it. But then what I think it's also nice is that you also say that you don't want to be in a section in a bookshop, and in fact having a section in a bookshop is probably a black artist section in a bookshop is probably not something that you would want to have in a bookshop.
No, I wouldn't. I would absolutely not. I would not want that. You know,
I mean, same way I think it was Basquiat said when he was by an interviewer categorized as a black artist, it's like, well, you know, I am black, I'm an artist, but
yeah, because this is the way I view things, you know, like, yeah, I know what I'm doing. Yeah, I know the intent of what I'm doing, but I don't want to be, you know, it's like, this is black art, you know, like it's like, no, this is just art, you know what I mean? And for me, that's problematic, because what that do is it pins me down, you know. It's almost like, you know, like, I love sound, I also love furniture, I love, you know, like I want to create, you know, I'm trying to work it out to see like how I'm going to approach creating my first sculpture piece, you know, which is like a bookshelf. But, you know, like, you know, I do other shit, and it's not, you know, it's not subjected to just this idea of what people have in their minds. It's like, you know, like, I
Are you
know
doing a bookshelf? Are you doing a sculptural piece?
I want to do a sculpture piece. Yeah, you know, I'm trying how I want to approach that, you know, but yeah, we're not trying to pin, you know, like no matter what we do is gonna be, it's Black art. You know what I mean? And I always say that, you know, like white people have the luxury of making anything that they want without it coming back to their race, without it coming back to it being some type of political statement. You know what I mean? And it's like, I'm not saying that, you know, everything that we do is gonna be political. You know what I mean? But some things is just like, yo, this has nothing to do with politics. This has nothing to do with whatever idea that you've created in your mind that you think this has to do with. You know, like, you know, even if like a Black artist made like a butterfly, it'll like painted a butterfly. It'll be like, oh, he made this butterfly because, you know, he's trying to feel happy because of the pain he went through as a Black person. And it's like, nah, I just wanted to paint a butterfly. You know, this have nothing to do with any of that. So it's like, you know,
but it must be painful because I'm not British, I'm Serbian. Okay. You know, I grew up in a war zone pretty much. And I find that difficult myself to, you know, as I try to approach the art world, I see that there are these kind of set of rules that you need to tick, that a lot of them are to do with identity. And so, and I myself find them incredibly frustrating, you know, even though I could, you know, you could say I'm a kind of in a more privileged position, but I don't think anyone is in a privileged position when you're forced to do what you don't want to do, you know, when you're forced to, you know, not paint a butterfly because you just want to paint a beautiful object, but you have to relate it to an identity. So I think what you're saying doesn't obviously just apply to Black artists and creatives, but it's just the way that the art world functions at the moment.
Well, the reason why I particular, I mean, because historically, I mean, this is not like within the last, you know, 20 years or 30 years. Like historically, you know, whether it be the art of painting or the art of making music, particularly for Black people, you know, interviewers, write-ups, how the work is being viewed has always come back to identity.
You're right. Yeah.
Pain, suffering.
You are absolutely right. Yeah.
And I feel good as shit right now. I'm happy. I'm not depressed. You know, there's a lot of things going on in the world right now that I'm upset about. But like the work that I make, you know, it comes from so many different elements. And I'm not trying to create trauma through my work. You know, I'm not trying to present trauma. I am trying to make the most beautiful things that I can possibly make. And it has very little to do with the traumatic experience of being Black. You know, it's not about a traumatic experience to me.
Basically saying that you're able to separate those two things.
Of course, because, you know, I know the trauma. I get the trauma, but I don't need to bring this trauma into something that I love. I love doing what I do, so I don't want to do it. And yeah, there are some painful images in the work that I make, but I'm not trying to create trauma.
So, I mean, I do feel that in America, situation is particularly bad in terms of racism. I mean, obviously there is racism everywhere, but I think in America it's kind of
globally.
No, I completely agree, but I just have a feeling that with police brutality, it's, you know, police in European countries doesn't shoot at people if,
Yeah.
you know, they just, I think it's very rare that you would just have a kind of scenes that we've all seen.
Of course.
So I think in some way there's absolutely racism. There is in Britain, there is stop and search, where the result of the stop and search policy are basically stopping of, you know, Black people. But so in that's what I mean by, I feel that America is more traumatic.
Yes, I can.
And it spills out from, I'm sure that Black people across the world feel the pain. I mean, I can't begin to imagine how does one handle that, and how does it, you know, because we've been talking about how you kind of separate it from the work, but how do you separate it from the work?
Oh man, I think you know, I can't necessarily say that because I can't speak. I think I can't speak for every Black person. In some sense, I could, as far as like the traumatic experience. Yeah, like we all is used to the trauma, but I'm almost certain that we all deal with it differently. But particularly speaking about how do I deal with the traumatic experience of being Black. I mean, there's no real manual on emotions, and I think that those things are all approached, you know, at different times of how you could deal with the traumatic experience of being Black. And for me, you know, I mean, I've seen some wicked shit, you know, like some real nasty, conniving things, you know, done to Black people. And for me, you know, I think that my way of dealing with it has gotten better over time, because I think age helped me particularly handle these experiences as well. I've now passed the part of anger and rage, and now I'm trying to look for solidarity within myself. And I'm also trying to extend solidarity to my community as a whole. So I understand the traumatic aspect of what takes place globally, but particularly, like you said, speaking about here in America, I'm trying to create communication between me and my community to bring solidarity within us first, so that we can all approach this trauma together in peace and solidarity, with love, approach it with love, without necessarily allowing it to control every aspect of our lives. Because we also still have to live, right? And we still also have our families, and we still also have our community, and we still also.
And that's, I mean, a new elect politician, it should be their job to make things work, you know.
Oh, but that's asking for too much. I mean, you know, Malcolm X said that we can't look for the politicians to solve our problems. We have to, if we waited for them to solve our problems, we'll be waiting forever. We have to come to some conclusion to create solidarity between us first. And everything else is a bonus from that point on. Because I feel like even if you don't have support from if you have support within your community, I think that you'll be in the best position to be able to move forward. Not forget, but to move forward. Again, I also have I cannot live my life in rage. I cannot live my life in fear, and I cannot live my life in frustration. I also have to create a way in which I can be able to live a modest, peaceful life, no matter what is going on around me. And
make beautiful work.
And make beautiful work. And I think that's what helps me be able to deal with the trauma and the killings and everything else that go along with it. And also, I just don't believe the politicians, so that's very easy for me. You know, I just don't. I know they're liars, so I think that that's like also a way for me to deal with it. Like I don't believe them, so it helps me.
So you're comfortable. You're comfortable with taking on that responsibility of having a dialogue within a community rather than exporting it to somebody. You know, expecting anyone else to sort things out.
Yeah, because they don't know how to deal with us on an emotion
Yeah.
From an emotional standpoint. I know what the people in my community is going through. They're only looking at it from a political standpoint. You know, they're looking at it like, oh, okay, we give them more jobs and more money and more of this and more of that, they'll be better. That's only the that's the tangible exchange. I'm looking about the emotional and the that aspect, the mentality. I'm trying to create love through dialogue, through talking, through embracing, through BlackMass Publishing, you know, because we don't just stop there. We also are a community as well. You know, we help communities. We donate, you know, just over the summer, we made some books and we donated all the proceeds to two different organizations that help Black people with shelter, and particularly also Black women with therapy. So
Okay.
you know, we know that those were very important things to do. So we did this as well.
What's your relationship to Africa as a continent?
Oh, man.
Because I've seen some beautiful photographs, but I'd just quite like to know what's the channel.
My relationship to, that's the origins. That's where we from. We from Africa. You know, like I'm not American. You know, like I was born here, but
you are American.
Like, I'm an African. You know, like I'm an African. You know, that's another subject. But to keep it surface level, I visited Africa for the first time, West Africa last year. Particularly, I went to Senegal. I spent 1 month there, and it was a very life-changing experience for me. It was very therapeutic. I was actually angry my first 3 days there. Because here in America, pretty much I just think in the Western world, the depiction of Africa has always been based off of like poverty and poor and starving children. And when I got there, it was less of what I initially expected and more of what I didn't expect. And so embracing and so loving. And I'm not saying that poverty was removed, but what I'm saying is it was not presented in an aspect that the Western world presents it in. And, I saw people that was happy, that was obliged, very cheerful and loving and caring. And
Yusuf, who were you angry at? Yourself, media?
More so the Western idea of what Africa was presented to me as, but also, I was definitely not angry at myself because, being taught in America is like being taught blindly.
Yeah.
So, the aspects in what we're taught, especially about a particular place like Africa, is always taught from this stereotypical. Like when I got to Africa, I didn't even see a tiger. I didn't even see like animal
monkey.
Like safari and monkey. It's like, what? I didn't see none of that. I'm like, you know what I mean? So like when we're taught like a safari, we're taught poverty, and I was just angry.
Well, these are all Western inventions. I mean, safari is a colonial invention, right?
So when I got there, it's not necessarily that I was expecting that, but it was an idea, that I was you know, that was kind of like forced on the Western Black person to have, you know, a depiction of what Africa means. So, you know, like when I got there, it's not that I was expecting to see that, but I was like, you know, I've been lied to. It kind of like made me feel like this talk that James Baldwin did in 1963 at Oxford in London. And it's such a beautiful talk. And midway towards the end of the talk, he slams his hands down on the desk and he says, how would you then feel when you finally realize that you've been lied to?
I know, that's very powerful. I know that one. Yeah.
You know, at that point, everything else switch in your mind, and you're like, "Oh, so this was a lie," and that's how I felt. You know, so you know.
And how was the rest of your time? So that was the first 3 days.
That was like the first 2 or 3 days. Yeah, the rest of my time was lovely. It was a very beautiful experience. I was between Dakar and St. Louis, which is like 4 hours apart out of each other. It's about 4 hours, and I got a ride out there, and I stayed with some very good people that I know, and I enjoyed my time there. I look forward to going back. You know, if situations better with travel.
Yeah.
I look forward to going back. That's home for me. That's home. That's for sure. Home.
So it did feel like home. Wow.
Oh, by far, it felt like home. You know, I felt more.
There is no racism in Africa.
I mean, if it is, it's not coming from within. The community. You know, it's outside. You know, I think the worst part for me though was the effects of French colonization that you still see.
Of course. I mean, it's still.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I think that was more.
I mean, I guess most visibly in South Africa, for example, where there is a real colonization, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And particularly West Africa too, particularly Dakar, which was colonized by the French, and you still see the aspects, you know, those colonial homes and a lot of those things are still standing. And, you know, these people got to see this, you know, speaking the language that, you know, that was forced on them. You know, that's why I was telling everybody, I'm like, yo, you know, I'd rather speak Wolof. Let me speak, you know, the local language as opposed to, you know, dialoguing in French.
And how did that impact your work? Do you think your work has given it a new language?
Yeah, in many regards, it has. Yeah, because also it allowed me to also because my work is also therapy for me. It's therapy. You know?
Same. I think for me, my work is literally therapy.
Yeah, it's definitely therapy, and going back home, going back to Africa was a spiritual journey for me. It was therapy. Yeah. You know, I went back, you know, like for spiritual therapy. So it allowed that, you know, particularly that trip expanded my mind. So when I came back, it was kind of like a new me. And, you know, I allowed that therapy to also influence how I operate as an artist, you know. So
I mean, 2020 was really a year that kind of, you know, was a bit like war. It was like a war. I mean, that's from an outside perspective. I don't know.
Nah, it's like a war. I mean, I always tell people,
civil war.
Like, if y'all think that George Floyd was because people look at like George Floyd was assassinated, you know, he was murdered. But if people is looking at George Floyd in 2020 and everything that was just taking place globally as like a shock to what they think, that's like the scratch of the surface as to, you know, the frustration. That was not even the minimum of the stress of frustration for Black people globally, you know, because I always mention Black people globally, not just here in America. Like I fight for, and I am in conversation with Black people on all fronts in every region. So I don't separate. Obviously, we deal with struggles differently based on region, but I think that we all conclude and we can all agree that we are both in the same boat when it comes to the larger problem.
I mean, we talked about jazz, but there's the real role of photography and poetry in your work that maybe could be, I guess, separated from, also looked at, well, not in isolation, but also kind of acknowledged as kind of important aspect of it.
Yeah, because poetry also informs an idea, because poetry is a language. And I remember I had wrote this little memo, and it says the poet arrived and then the poet left. And I think that people put too much strain on the idea of what they think a poet should do. And I think that the poet's only job is to do, like what I said was to show up and then leave. And then he shifts the atmosphere in the room, because poetry is a language, literally a language, but also it's a it's a style and a way of communication. Last year, I was very fortunate enough to, I don't know if you're familiar with Steve Cannon, but he's a climate of a person, just him, not just him as a poet, as an artist, but just him as a person. He's a very beautiful person. He passed away last year, and he invited me over to his home, and he kind of, I'm always very grateful for him. At the beginning of TT, the book is also dedicated to him, to the poet Steve Cannon. And he invited me over, and he you know, he was able to, I personally feel like, to be a part of such a beautiful era for poetry. You know, the late 50s, 60s, and 70s. And, you know, this was the time of the beat poets, which was also informed by jazz as well. And Ted Jones, also a favorite poet of mine, to also inform the idea, you know, this language that exists in his work. I also try to translate this language within how I approach book arts, through poetry, because, you know, the books are also very poetic. Want it to kind of read like a poem as well, you know, because a poet, you know, poems are languages, and you know, poems also have very beautiful transition points. So I also want to create that same feel with the way I approach books, like this poetic remnant, you know. So it's like this era for me of like the beat poets, and the beat poets are inspired by free jazz. And then when you merge the two, it's kind of like, again, these things were created because they didn't want to be pinned down. You know, and again, you know, I don't want to be pinned down. And the beat poets moved in that same manner. And so the free jazz players, they moved in the same manner, where you could not pin down the sound. You know, it was constantly changing. You know, free jazz is real obvious. So,
because you're talking about, you talk about the freedom. There's a real sense of freedom in what you're after. But what's interesting is that books still gives you a kind of some constraints. You know, it is that.
oh, well,
and it's maybe like a format. It's a square. Like, you know, there are certain kind of physical, geometric, sequential rules.
I would say partially, yeah, the idea of what I do, the book is in my mind, but I'm not trying to present it in this traditional aspect of how the book is supposed to be presented. And again, I speak, I think early in the conversation, I think I said, I don't know, but about this traditional aspect on how people interact with the book. So for me, you know, I'm also investigating this idea on how books operate unbinded. So, you know,
Yeah.
like how does the book operate in this manner? And how is it informed? How do you now interact with the book now that it's not helped with something? And I'm into this idea of presenting the book as a separate entity, a detached from you know, this page by page
Yeah.
section. And again, that is also influenced by music because interlopes. So I love interlopes. Sometimes they're better than the initial soundtrack. So like interlopes is like these short periods, you know, that you get on albums. They used to do them a lot in the 70s. Like Isaac Hayes and a lot of these guys would do it. James Brown, where they would have like little skits that would lead you into the next. So that's how I'm interacting with these, not binding the book and using it as a way to inform like its own piece. It's kind of like a transition period into where you have a breather after something so heavy. So like, you know, I don't want to like keep it constrained to like together. I want to kind of like loosen it all up and let you interact with it, you know, in your own particular way. So yeah, I would agree with you partially that the book is the idea. Um,
There is one question, and that is, and I love that you call it book, and book is important, but how about magazine?
no, I don't know. Like, I mean, a magazine. Well, I say booklet. You know, there's some. You know, zine is a form of a magazine because you know the zine was for kind of like uh this underground. I mean, the zine was introduced because the magazines didn't want to publish the work that these artists were publishing. They felt like no one wants to see this. So yeah, I mean, I don't call it magazine because it's not a magazine. I like the way I interact with the
No, I
idea.
don't mean calling your work a magazine. I meant more
Oh no, no,
like,
no. I know what you mean.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
magazines have like a very short lifespan and then it's on to the next. So it's repetitive, but it's not repetitive as far as the content is concerned. So
Mm.
you'll get the April issue, you'll get the September, like, you know, that are, you know, it's printed in this idea of like it's consistent to where, you know, depending on the book could be reprinted. It's kind of like this pinned down idea. Um, it's, you know, again, it'll go back to what I've said time and time again. My interaction with the book is is intentional and non-intentional. The intentional is that it's a book. Uh, or practical and non-practical is the idea that I'm not going to utilize it in that manner.
Mm.
Um, and then I'm going to try to also transmit things in that form that necessarily mean some may have a difficult time translating into something that's so like consolidated, like it's something as such as the book. Like, how do you translate sound, right, to something like the book, right? Without without engaging with sound from a literal standpoint of like hearing it, but how do you then inform sound through the book? And I think I did that already, and I did that through TT because the book was made um, off of sound. So, you know, you then engage with it in that manner, you know, even knowing more that it was, you know, made off of the remnants of sound. You then now engage with this. So now it becomes sheet music. It's sheet music. It's literally sheet music. and it goes in a flow. It flows. You know, sheet music is used to play the sound, the music, and the way it's been supposed to be conducted, to be played. Yeah, it's called Trife Life, and this was also informed off of music. But I was thinking more of a film when I made this. So you know, it's kind of like for me, like the characters of like if I was to do a film, and the book, you know, this is a film technically.
Nice.
The first start to the film, because a film is still images speeded up. When you're making a film, it's still images that are then like speeded up. So this is just the stills of the film. So technically I did make a film. So this is a film, you know.
Yeah.
For me it's a film, you know. So I did this, and I did it in a little booklet. So I think this is like, yeah, like my introduction, and to continue in this idea of film and music.
You're kind of practicing as a, well, okay, you're a publisher, you're a, but do you see yourself as an artist?
Ooh. I mean, for the sake of an argument, yes.
Yeah.
For the sake
it's easy, right? It's an easy one.
For me not going back and forth, yes, I do. But again, it comes back to, because I don't like to be held by tradition.
Yeah.
So, you know,
or definition.
Artists have a tradition that's attached to it, and then a tradition pins the mind down. It pins the idea of what people think you're supposed to be down, and I'm not really